The game almost not about basketball at all. I mean, it's now the aftermath. You got Dejanay Carrington running her mouth. Dejanay Carrington making a post that one could construed as a threat. You guys know the saying, it's on site. It's on site. That means somebody's going to get into it. They're going to go the next time they see that person or that team.
That right there is why this game blew up far beyond the final score. The argument is no longer just about a hard foul. It is about what happened afterward. What people...
It's about this. Here we go. Dejanay Carrington clotheslining Sophie Cunningham.
Face coming down, trying to prevent the layup, but that is just...
Right there.
A hard hit. That's...
Sophie was not having it. You know Sophie, she ain't backing down. Sophie was ready to go. And you got Dejanay Carrington running to the threads.
Start with the part nobody has to speculate about. Dejanay Carrington made a hard play on Sophie Cunningham. Cunningham immediately reacted, and Carrington was eventually ejected after the officials ruled it a flagrant 2. Sophie Cunningham is not exactly known for shrinking from confrontation either. So once those two collided, the temperature of the entire game changed instantly. But there is an important distinction here. A flagrant foul is something officials can review on video. Intent beyond the play is harder to prove. You can believe Carrington crossed the line without pretending you know exactly what was in her head. And that distinction becomes extremely important once we get to what she posted afterward. Because the basketball itself was actually compelling. Indiana survived a game that tightened dramatically late. Caitlin Clark finished with 26.
She didn't put this on Twitter, by the way. But she did make a post on Twitter. So she tweeted out white privilege in caps at Indiana Fever. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Can I just be real? How many black races are there in the WNBA? Seems like a bunch that just can't stand white folks. Just can't stand white folks. At all. At all. She was ejected from the game. It was a flagrant 2.
Now we get to the statement that poured gasoline on everything. Carrington posting the words white privilege and tagging the Indiana Fever after her ejection. That is a public statement. It is fair to analyze it. But what exactly was she alleging? Was she saying the officials treated Cunningham differently because she is white? Was she arguing Carrington herself was punished more severely? Was she reacting emotionally to the ejection without making a detailed accusation at all? The post did not provide evidence or explanation, and that vacuum is precisely why the reaction became so explosive. There are really two separate questions. The first is whether Carrington deserved the flagrant 2. Based on what viewers saw in the ruling made on the floor, officials decided the contact met that threshold. The second question is whether race affected the officiating. Carrington's post suggested some version of that argument, but a social media accusation is not proof by itself. That is where the league has a problem. Once a player publicly introduces race into a disputed officiating decision, the WNBA cannot control how the internet interprets it. Fans immediately choose sides. Every slow-motion angle becomes evidence for somebody. Every previous foul gets dragged back into the conversation. And suddenly one possession is being treated like a referendum on the entire league.
I'm just pointing that out. Now, I tagged the WNBA in this at WNBA. This feels like a threat against the Indiana Fever. Dejanay tweets out 8:23 with a smile. Now, again, that's the next time they play, folks. Uh-oh, what you gonna do on 8:23? What's going down 8:23 at Kathy Engelbert? At W? You got your ears on? That sounds a whole lot like it's on site.
And this is the post that created the second firestorm. Carrington wrote 8:23 with a smiling emoji, and critics connected that date to the next scheduled matchup. Some people interpreted it as an on-site message or a warning aimed at Indiana. That interpretation has been circulating publicly, but we need to be precise. The post itself does not explicitly say she intends to hurt anybody, unless Carrington explains exactly what she meant. Calling it a confirmed threat goes beyond what the actual words establish. Still, context matters. If you have just been ejected after a confrontation, then post the date of the next meeting with a smile, people are naturally going to read hostility into it. Athletes know that. Teams know that. The league definitely knows that. A vague message can sometimes create more drama than a direct one, because everybody projects their own meaning onto it. And now August 23 becomes more than another date on the schedule. Every hard screen, every transition foul, every Cunningham-Carrington interaction in that next meeting will be watched differently. Officials will know it. Broadcasters will know it. Players will know it. That is where the WNBA has to make a decision. Treat the post as meaningless unless something explicit was said, or decide the combination of the ejection and the message requires some kind of warning, fine, or review. Whatever the league does, people will compare it to how other players have been disciplined.
Clay Travis, blatant racism on the foul in the tweet. She should be thrown out of the league for the rest of the year. But it's the WNBA, so she would probably get a 5-year contract extension. Yeah. The league just tweeted out, just put out that whole statement about not hating, no space for hate, blah, blah, blah. So how long will DeJournette's suspension be? How long? 10 games? Rest of the year?
Clay Travis went much further, arguing that Carrington should be removed for the rest of the season. That is his opinion, not an announced league punishment, and it shows how quickly the debate jumped from one foul to calls for massive discipline. This is also where viewers should separate anger from precedent. A suspension should be based on established rules, the severity of the play, prior history if relevant, and whatever the league can actually verify. If the WNBA decides punishment based on which side is screaming loudest online, then nobody is going to trust the next disciplinary decision either. The stronger criticism is simpler. If the league talks publicly about respect, player safety, and eliminating hateful conduct, it has to apply those principles consistently. That applies to everyone. Star, role player, rookie, veteran. Indiana, Connecticut, New York, Las Vegas. The standard matters more than the identity of the player involved. And consistency becomes even more important, because this was not the only officiating controversy in the game. While fans were arguing over Carrington and Cunningham, Caitlin Clark picked up a technical foul that created a completely different kind of outrage.
How about this? Caitlin Clark getting a foul because of reasons? She got a technical foul for not a damn thing, folks. Not a damn thing. Momentum carried her into the ref. She brushed up against the ref. And let me keep it real. I'm going to keep it real. The DEI official, Rhodes said it. You heard me. The DEI official tees up Caitlin Clark.
Watch how quickly the narrative changed. Instead of discussing Clark's performance, people started debating whether incidental contact with an official really justified a technical. The broadcast commentary argues that momentum carried Clark into the referee, and that the contact did not warrant the call. That is an interpretation of the play, but the consequences could matter far beyond one possession, because technical foul accumulation can eventually trigger suspension under league rules. And this is where Indiana fans became furious. The Carrington foul looked violent enough to produce an ejection, while Clark's interaction with the official looked comparatively minor to many viewers. When those two moments happen in the same game, people start comparing punishments even though they involve different rules. That comparison may not be perfectly apples to apples, but perception matters. If fans feel one player is being punished aggressively for small actions while opponents are allowed to escalate physically against her team, trust erodes fast. The league's safest move is transparency. Explain why the technical met the standard. Review it afterward. If it was wrong, rescind it. If it was correct, explain the rule.
By the way, if the WNBA does not rescind this technical, Caitlin Clark is suspended for the game against the Liberty. The game against New York. Now, this looks like an obvious technical foul that should get rescinded, right? But how many times does the WNBA not do the right thing? And based on anything, how about this? You got a huge game against the other largest market team. You got the most popular team, if there is such thing as America's team, versus the New York team. That's a huge...
And now you understand why this technical became bigger than one referee's decision. The source commentary believed another technical could affect Clark's availability for a major game against New York. That creates a business angle the league cannot pretend does not exist. Caitlin Clark is one of the biggest audience drivers in women's basketball. Indiana games routinely receive enormous attention because people want to watch her play. A marquee matchup involving Indiana and New York is valuable television inventory. But this is exactly why the league cannot officiate based on television value either. You cannot rescind a technical because the star involved sells tickets. You rescind it if the technical was incorrect. Anything else creates another credibility problem. That tension is fascinating. Fans want the WNBA to protect its biggest attraction. Competitive integrity demands that Clark receive the same rules as everybody else. Those positions only conflict when officiating quality is questionable. If the calls are obvious and consistent, nobody has to debate whether business interests should matter. The controversy therefore becomes a test of competence more than favoritism. Can the league review its own officials, admit errors when they occur, and maintain a standard that survives scrutiny when millions of people are examining every frame?
CDS Sports Podcast. At Kathy Engelbert, your league is burning to the ground. Caitlin Clark was fouled into the refs. The ref's response is to call a T on Caitlin. This means missing an ESPN game, so great job there. Stop the DEI hires. My boy, he said DEI hires too. Scott Agnes, shout out, Dark Side. Shout out, Dark Side. Clark is having a conversation with official Genesis Perryman during the timeout, trying to get an explanation for the technical foul. Based on the game broadcast, there was nothing worthy of a tech and should be rescinded.
Scott Agnes added another important piece, noting that Clark was speaking with official Genesis Paramount during the timeout and seeking an explanation for the technical. He also argued that, based on the broadcast, there was nothing obvious enough to justify it. The interesting part is not the social media demand to fire somebody or attach political labels to an official. That does not prove whether the call was right or wrong. The useful question is much narrower. What exactly did the referee see that viewers apparently did not? That is the type of thing the WNBA should want to answer, because officiating controversy is inevitable in professional sports. The NBA has it. The NFL has it. College basketball has it. What damages confidence is when fans cannot identify a consistent threshold. If brushing an official while being carried by momentum is automatically a technical, tell everyone. If officials have discretion based on whether they believe contact was avoidable, explain that. If the referee simply made an error in real time, admit that too. And notice how far away we have already moved from the actual score. That is the recurring frustration around these fever games. The basketball produces plenty of storylines by itself, yet the post-game conversation repeatedly becomes dominated by fouls, technicals, confrontations, and social media warfare.
How about something related to basketball? Caitlin. Good Lord. She gonna dribble it out over a tree. She shoots a three over Camila Cardoso, who's like 12 foot tall. She's like 6'5", but still knocks down the three.
That shot is almost the perfect reminder of what gets buried underneath all this noise. Clark creates space against Camila Cardoso, one of the tallest defenders she could possibly have in front of her, and still knocks down the three. That should be part of the story. So should the playmaking. So should Mitchell's scoring. So should Boston's work inside. Instead, the defining image becomes a collision, and the defining screenshot becomes a post about privilege. And there is a reason these fever games keep becoming magnets for controversy. Indiana attracts a giant audience. Giant audiences create giant reactions. A hard foul that might dominate one news cycle elsewhere can become a week-long debate when Caitlin Clark's team is involved. That does not automatically mean every opponent is targeting Indiana. It means every confrontation involving Indiana is amplified. Players understand that, which should theoretically make everyone more careful. Instead, sometimes it appears to make the emotions even stronger. There is also a competitive component people overlook. Teams do not want to be treated like supporting characters in the Caitlin Clark show. They are trying to win.
What is going on? We're doing this again. This is not my only video on DJNA. Matrix and Roadshow channel. I got a follow-up lined out already. You got Dan Dockage, Brianna Turner going to war right now. That's going to be part of that video. Holy shit. It is never about the game. By the way, Fever won. In case I didn't make that.
There it is. Even the commentator admits the bizarre reality that Indiana actually won, yet the victory became almost an afterthought. And this is the payoff to the question we opened with. Why did this particular game explode so badly afterward? It was not one single moment. It was the combination. You had a physical collision involving two players who already carry reputations for refusing to back down. You had an ejection. You had a public accusation involving race. You had a cryptic reference to the next meeting. You had Clark receiving a technical that many viewers believed was undeserved. Then you had commentators and fans attaching their own political and cultural interpretations to every one of those events. When all of that stacks together, basketball becomes almost impossible to separate from the surrounding narrative. But that does not mean every interpretation deserves equal weight. Carrington's white privilege post is real and fair game for criticism. The 823 post is also real. Calling the second post a confirmed threat, however, requires an inference because no explicit threat appears in the quoted message itself. Likewise, claiming an official intentionally targeted Clark for political or racial reasons requires evidence that has not been established by the game footage alone. You can criticize the foul, you can criticize the technical, you can criticize the league,
It is never about the game. By the way, Fever won. In case I didn't make that clear, the Fever won. But the players in this league, they legitimately cannot accept that the phenom from Iowa and the tall, beautiful, good-looking blonde.
Now we get into the popularity argument, and this is probably the emotional center of the entire conflict around Indiana. Caitlin Clark became a phenomenon before entering the WNBA because of what she did at Iowa. The enormous three-point shots, the scoring records, the passing, the NCAA tournament runs, the crowds, that audience followed her into the professional game. Sophie Cunningham has also become significantly more visible through her role with Indiana, and through several physical confrontations that made her a fan favorite among people who believe the Fever needed more toughness. But popularity is not proof that the rest of the league resents someone because of race or sexuality. That is an enormous claim requiring evidence player by player. Professional athletes can dislike an opponent for competitive reasons, personality conflicts, media attention, physical play, previous incidents, or dozens of other factors. Where the source commentary goes wrong is turning the frustration of particular individuals into a sweeping judgment about an entire group. That does not help analyze what actually happened. The more defensible point is this: Clark's popularity has disrupted the established attention economy of the WNBA. Games involving her receive disproportionate coverage. Every statement about her travels farther. Every hard foul is replayed more often. Every opponent gets judged by an audience much larger than the league was accustomed to dealing with. That creates pressure. And pressure reveals every weakness in a league's systems. Weak officiating becomes a national argument. Poor communication becomes evidence of bias. An emotional social media post becomes headline material. A physical rivalry becomes a culture war story. The WNBA cannot stop fans from arguing, but it can stop feeding the chaos through inconsistent decisions and vague explanations.
Clay Travis again. Black WNBA player clothesline Sophie Cunningham in a layup, gets ejected, tweets white privilege from the locker room to argue she was ejected because of racism. Identity politics is destroying everything, even sports. Once again, not about actual basketball.
The criticism you just heard says identity politics is overtaking the sport. Whether you agree with that framing or not, there is a real warning buried inside it. Sports become exhausting when every disagreement is immediately transformed into something larger than the actual evidence supports. A bad foul can simply be a bad foul. A bad technical can simply be bad officiating. A player can make an inflammatory post and deserve criticism for the words she actually used without fans inventing additional motives they cannot prove. The WNBA's challenge is that it wants to be both a professional sports league and a major cultural institution. Its players have strong public voices. The league has encouraged activism. Fans arrive with very different political perspectives. That guarantees friction. The answer cannot be to silence players whenever they say something controversial. It also cannot be to ignore inflammatory public statements whenever discipline becomes inconvenient. The league needs clear policies applied consistently. If a player threatens an opponent explicitly, there should be a standard for that. If a flagrant foul meets suspension criteria, there should be a standard for that. And if a referee's technical is reviewed and found incorrect, there should be a mechanism to fix it. Consistency cool.
This feels like a threat against the Indiana Fever. Dejanay tweets out 823 with a smile. Now, again, that's the next time they play, folks. Uh-oh, what you gonna do on 823? What's going down 823 at Kathy Engelbert, at W. You got your ears on? That sounds a whole lot like its own site. Its own site.
And now we come back to August 23rd, because that is where this story could either cool down or become much worse. The smartest thing everyone involved can do is make the next meeting about basketball. That does not mean playing softly. Physical defense is part of the game. Hard screens are part of the game. Competitive emotion is part of the game. But there is a huge difference between physical basketball and retaliation. Officials should know the history entering that matchup. The league should review the previous incident before the game, not after another confrontation happens. Indiana should not be looking for revenge. Carrington should not be entering the floor trying to prove something to social media. Cunningham should not either, because if one cheap shot happens in the rematch, every warning sign from this game will immediately be replayed. And that brings us to the decision the WNBA faces right now. The league does not need to manufacture a massive suspension simply because commentators demand one. It needs to review the flagrant foul under its existing rules, determine whether any supplemental discipline is warranted, examine the social media posts in their actual context, and review Clark's technical on its own merits. That sounds boring compared with the internet screaming about conspiracies, but boring competence is exactly what the league needs. The WNBA is experiencing more attention than it had for much of its history. That attention can create massive opportunities, but it also means mistakes are no longer disappearing quietly into small audiences. Every questionable whistle now has thousands of slow-motion detectives. Every player post gets screenshotted. Every disciplinary decision is compared against previous cases. The standard has to rise with the spotlight. Carrington deserves to be judged by what she actually did and what she actually posted, not by claims people cannot establish. Cunningham deserves protection from dangerous contact without being turned into a symbol for somebody else's political argument. Clark deserves fair officiating without officials feeling pressured by either her popularity or the backlash surrounding it. And fans deserve a league where the games themselves remain compelling enough that the final score does not feel like trivia underneath the latest controversy. So you tell me where you land. Was Carrington's 823 post just trash talk that people are reading too much into? Or did the context make it serious enough that the WNBA should step in before the rematch? And should Clark's technical stand if the league's review finds the contact was incidental? Drop your call in the comments. Like the video if you want more breakdowns built around what we can actually verify. And subscribe, because whatever happens the next time these teams meet, everybody is going to be watching.